The Oblivion Remaster's shadow drop surprised no one, given that it was among the worst kept secrets over the last few weeks, but what did surprise was the sheer extent of its visual overhaul. Described by creative director Todd Howard as keeping the bones, the core underlying logic of the original 2006 game intact, it's fallen on developer Virtuous to use Unreal Engine 5 to rework the visuals. It's a much needed move, and today's remaster gives us the works, deploying the full suite of UE5 features as a graphics renderer. The world's lighting is transformed via its lumen technology, allowing for an approximated form of ray-traced global illumination and reflections with dynamic shadows. Character models, materials, and effects are also reworked from scratch. Plus, in terms of animations, we get a new locomotion system helping to address the rather stilted movement of the original. Best of all, Virtuous also digs deep into the code to add quality of life improvements, like a modernized UI, leveling system, a sprint button, and even updated lip sync technology for NPCs.
You are the one from my dreams. Then the stars were right.
Today then, I'm putting the console versions through their paces, with Xbox Series X and S in the spotlight, while a more in-depth look at PS5 and PS5 Pro is to follow soon. The latest 1.9GB hotfix, which went live on Friday 25th of April, has only rolled out to Xbox so far, and makes crucial improvements to frame rate performance. No doubt the PS5 consoles will get an equivalent patch soon, maybe even the moment this video drops, and we want to do that version justice with a comparable build. For now though, what's the state of the Xbox Series X on its 30fps quality mode and 60fps performance mode using this latest patch? And also, is Series S an enjoyable way to play with its single 30fps means of running the game? Let's find out. Kicking off with Series X, the game translates beautifully to Microsoft's flagship machine with a software-based form of UE5's Lumen. Model quality and materials are standout, and the good news is that both of Series X's graphics modes deliver the goods. There is a difference in Lumen GI quality, where quality mode runs at a higher setting, resolving lighting and shadow bounces more accurately. This most notably affects the detailing of shade in interiors and also the bounce lighting around the underside of arches, but performance mode generally holds up well. Across broad views of the open world, meanwhile, shadow filtering is also much improved on quality mode, sharpening shadow detail at range, while tree LOD levels and grass draw distances are pushed up a preset too. You'll also notice texture filtering gets a bump here. Most of the quality mode benefits are in long distance detail though, where up close detail like textures, shadows, and geometry are identical either way. Finally, native resolution is the other main dividing point. In order to hit 60 frames per second, the performance mode targets 1440p in the very best case, which it does reach on the inventory screen where it only has to render a character model. In practice though, in regular gameplay, Series X runs at a 1760 by 990 resolution in most typical outdoor gameplay at 60fps. On the other hand, the 30fps quality mode pushes to a higher 1620p peak value, again in the inventory screen, while most actual gameplay rests at a native 1440p in typical play, and a worst case figure coming in at 1296p. In effect then, the cost of running at 60 frames per second boils down to an image quality hit, lower world LODs, and a drop in Lumen GI quality. Clarity is reduced in still shots then, but we're getting more pixel data per second this way, thanks to the essentially doubling in frames rendered by the console. It's my recommended pick despite those cutbacks, though there are some major performance issues to point out here. Testing frame rate performance on Series X, the 60fps target is well met in most small areas like dungeons or inside the city walls. Here, the only grievance is really the presence of hitching. Some hitches coincide with autosaves, while others are related to striking an enemy, switching camera view, or simply starting a conversation with an NPC. There's no escaping it. Frame time spikes are possible even in simpler spots, but generally, dungeons hold well at the 60 FPS mark so far. However, with all that being said, easily the biggest issues at 60 FPS arise when you set foot in the open world. Especially while galloping at pace on horseback, traversal stutters are a constant problem on Series X in certain regions. Winding your way down a mountaintop, for example, you'll see frequent spikes to 70 milliseconds, and at worst, a cluster of dropped frames take us to 140 milliseconds. Often, these hitches coincide with pop-in, for geometry on major buildings far ahead, and it always occurs at set points outside the city walls. It's also, at times, accompanied by a frame rate in the 40 to 50 FPS range. Most of these drops appear to stem from a CPU limit in handling the original game logic and world streaming, and therefore, oddly enough, you'll notice the frame rate start to improve once you stand still. Thankfully, not all areas are quite at this extreme, but it's still easy to stumble on regions which do constantly run at sub 60. This matches my colleague Alex Battaglia's findings on PC as well, where a powerful CPU is a must for attaining high frame rates. In the end, on Series X, rapid movement equates to a higher frequency of hitches while outdoors, and also sustained drops, while moving more slowly on foot tends to reduce the likelihood of issues. This is, of course, all running on the very latest patch on Series X, the April 25th update, which shows version number 233550 in the game's settings menu. Astonishingly, this is actually an improvement over what we had in the launch build. Compared to my banked footage of the older version 233194, we're now running at frame rates up to 16 FPS higher on Series X. Weather and cloud coverage are hard to control precisely between runs, but the overall trend of improvement is pretty clear. Virtuous's new patch improves all stress test areas on Series X, and while clearly imperfect in its current state, it makes this mode more viable for VRR displays, with Series X offering a workable range of 40 to 60 Hz. Whether it's galloping across the landscape or battling through the volcanic plains of Oblivion, the new patch is more adept at keeping it above 40 FPS. That being said, the hitches and stutters remain, and always in the exact same spots while traversing the world, and so long as the frame time spike is above 25 milliseconds, these will still stand out on a VR display. One last point before we move on, I looked into a potential visual downgrade between patches, and the results were largely inconclusive. A few shots like this archway suggest a drop in GI setting for this performance mode, but repeat tests ended up showing matching lighting in booting the same save. Otherwise, outside of that anomaly, settings and even native resolutions are identical between versions, so we're more likely looking at optimizations under the hood in its handling of the original Oblivion logic. A word on base PS5, since I have some data to hand. It's worth noting that base PS5 still, at the time of publishing this video, runs on the older patch 233194, and as a result, the frame rate reading tracks closely with Series X on its equivalent older build. Everything mentioned about Series X's frame rate applies here. PS5, in its 60 FPS mode, runs well in dungeons, barring the odd hitch. It also shares the same native resolution target, peaking at 1440p in the 60 FPS mode, while curiously, most typical gameplay comes in at a lower 900p. Sadly, it also shares Series X's problem in handling any open world roaming at pace, where traversal hitches can be glaring. In using a matching mountaintop run as a stress test, base PS5 often runs at a similar average 35 to 50 FPS range to Series X on the older patch, sometimes higher, sometimes much lower depending on the point of the run. It's not clear why there are these variances between consoles, but it's certainly clear that PS5 is in need of attention with a new patch either way, to bring it closer to Series X's latest build. Again, this is a taster of a future video on PS5, and I'm hoping by then we get an equivalent improvement there. Moving on to the quality mode on Series X, we have a 30 FPS cap in place while running at a higher average resolution, improved GI and LODs. Despite the benefits, it's hard to really recommend this overall for two reasons. Firstly, because it's an unevenly frame-paced 30 FPS with constant fluctuations between 16, 33 and 50 milliseconds on the frame time graph. Even in simple dungeon areas, there's a constant judder to the screen motion as a result, which is obviously a distraction. Secondly, while traversal is essentially evened out at the 30 FPS line, some major hitching still remains on Series X. The threshold for seeing those hitches is higher, given the 33.3 millisecond frame time target, but any spikes which occur above that continue to stick out like a sore thumb. Overall, it must be said that the reading is otherwise flat at 30 FPS, barring the hitches, and so if Virtuous could fix the uneven frame pacing, it'd be much more usable. All of which brings us to the Xbox Series S situation. The reality for anyone playing on Series S is that they will have to make do with a similar 30 FPS experience to the Series X quality mode. There is no 60 FPS performance option, and so it's only possible to play with uneven frame pacing at 30 in this case. Generally speaking, Series S runs with a constant 30 FPS reading though, and no GPU limiting drops under that number, even in effects-heavy battles around the Oblivion plains. The main cause for drops under 30 though, much like on the premium Series X, is in traversal stutters, which kick in at the exact same points in the world. Visually speaking, Series S also makes cutbacks to sustain its 30 FPS line. First of all, the resolution is dropped to a 900p target, with a lower bounds reading coming in at around 810p. Next to Series X's own 30 FPS quality mode, there is a drop-off in image quality, but overall it's still a decent turnout for Series S. More striking is the drop in settings elsewhere. We have significantly pruned back grass draw, tree LODs, lower grade shadow quality, and even environmental textures are dropped to setting. You'll even notice plant density is lowered, meaning the earth at your feet will appear more barren and stripped of foliage. Finally, there is a subtle difference to the quality of the game's GI lighting, where Series X manages to more thoroughly light and shade interior areas, especially with its software lumen setting. Many of these settings are even lower than Series X's performance mode. All round, Series S sadly takes a hit in most aspects, and the result certainly removes some of the luster of the remaster. There's almost too much to do justice here, but developer Virtuous's work on the Oblivion Remaster goes well beyond the remit of any normal remaster. It's a true current-gen release that showcases Unreal Engine 5's latest tech, but it's clear that, for all its eye candy, there are ongoing issues on console. Xbox Series S owners are somewhat lumbered with a single, unevenly frame-paced 30 FPS mode, with some disappointing cutbacks in texture and world detail as well. On the other hand, even on the latest patch, Series X users must decide between two compromised options: a 30 FPS mode with similar frame pacing issues, or a 60 FPS option with drops in the open world. Traversal hitches are a problem all round, and arguably, this is the most crucial point to address on console right now. All of these performance issues should ideally not distract from what is otherwise a remarkable remaster project, but they do need addressing. I'll be back with a look at the PS5 and indeed PS5 Pro version in due course, but for now, if you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.